What's a zombie?
Well, a zombie, there's, Mr. Bill, there's...
The living dead.
There's definitely an obsession with zombies. The zombie is enjoying its most popular day.
By definition, a zombie is someone who straddles the line between life and death, and all of us, are concerned about that moment and what that means.
There's so much going on in terms of visuals and scares and special effects that it's not difficult to really fall in love with those movies.
I always say, be careful with firearms, because first they run out of ammo, and second of all, they're loud. And you're basically announcing to zombies, dinner is served. I think the machete is possibly the best weapon.
When you think of zombies, you think of Pittsburgh. When you're born in Pittsburgh, one of the things you want to be when you grow up is a zombie in a Romero movie.
Stephen King says, I don't have nightmares because I give them all to you. There may be something to that.
Just wait till you see the zombie.
Zombie? What's them?
Dead folks. What walks around?
They does. Yeah?
Especially here.
I had this fake gun.
Well, you used to really be scared here.
Johnny.
I was probably 13 years old, maybe.
You're still afraid.
Stop it now, I mean it.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
And I'll never forget, it would be like, as soon as the zombie showed up, we'd be like, ah! And we would shoot the TV, bang, 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 with the fake gun. And as soon as your 6 shots were up, you had to give the gun to the other guy. You get 6 shots, and then you don't have the gun anymore. By the end of the movie, with all the zombies, we were so nervous. 13 years old, we're like, the zombies are going to get us, we don't have any more bullets. And we played this really stupid game, but it was so frightening.
Have you thought out what you would do if a zombie attack was imminent?
Oh, like on an everyday basis. If you're a zombie geek, you can't help but think about that stuff.
Are they still out there?
Yeah. For other monsters, you usually have to go find them. You have to go to the castle, you have to go under the pyramid or into the swamp. And my attitude is, if you do, well, that's your problem. Whereas you can be sitting here, minding your own business, and suddenly you hear the moan, and the door breaks down, and there's 100 zombies. That's scary.
I think one of the most important guys out there for the zombie subgenre right now is Max Brooks, Mel Brooks' son, who wrote the Zombie Survival Guide, which is, very tongue and rotted cheek, and more recently World War Z, which is one of the best pieces of zombie fiction I've ever read.
Most people seek out horror, I think, because they feel at their core very safe. They feel like they're living in a safe world and they want to be scared. I'm already scared. I don't need to go searching for it. So I write anti-horror. I write about how to stop the horror. I don't need to make it up.
He is maybe one of the most important people telling zombie stories right now.
No one is more surprised at the success of Zombie Survival Guide than me. Thank you. When I started doing my zombie self-defense lectures, I thought they were just going to be a joke. I don't think there's anything remotely funny about being killed and eaten by zombies. I was completely unprepared for the barrage of questions. Who are the living dead? What are they? And why do they want to destroy us? All real. All questions like, what kind of sword should I use? What kind of steel should that sword be? Should it be full tang? What's the blade length? Should I wear body armor? These are the kind of questions I get asked constantly. You can never be too prepared, regardless of if they're out there or not, or if they're coming for you or not. Preparedness is the key. It's shocking.
What do you see in the glass?
I see happiness.
Is that all?
No. I see.
What is it?
I see death.
In terms of film history, the zombie appears relatively early in the 1930s and 40s. We have I Walked with a Zombie, White Zombie. What we're talking about there is more the, what I'd call perhaps awkwardly, the voodoo zombie.
Can't we do something?
Where it's someone who has simply lost control over their mind and are very often controlled by someone else who has some sort of knowledge of voodoo in order to reanimate the dead and use them as slaves or as mindless bodies to do their bidding.
There are three phases to the zombie film in cinema. It started out with stuff like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, White Zombie, I Walked with the Zombies. Those films sort of looked at zombies in a different way. They were sort of the somnambulist or the being controlled, the mind slave. They become mindless zombies.
A major turning point is with Romero's Night of the Living Dead in the late 1960s, where all of a sudden we no longer have this zombie being controlled by another force, but rather the zombie without any other direction than these basic instincts that remain, the need to eat, as a matter of fact, to consume. And that's probably Romero's genius to have used this metaphor and shifted just enough to show us that what really controls us is our fundamental need to use other people. His zombies are the masses, really, the slow-moving, working class, perhaps, that has been fooled by capitalism into thinking that it must consume, and in the process has lost its humanity, if you will.
The zombies became more of a menace, like a mindless menace that was out to physically harm us and consume us. That's when they became really scary. Third phase was around Return of the Living Dead, when zombies ceased to become scary anymore because they gave them a voice, they allowed them to talk and make jokes, and, you know, ever since, they really haven't been scary. We go watch something like Dawn of the Dead, the remake, and yeah, sure, it's great, it's fun, it's gory, it's full of action, but nobody's really scared by them anymore. The last time people were scared by zombie films would have been in the 70s, you know, Dawn of the Dead was still scary.
I still have zombie nightmares. And I think it might go back to just the idea of straight othering, that, you know, there's a huge intractable force of people that aren't quite people that want to eat you. That's scary.
I am petrified of zombies. As far as all the movie monsters go, they scare me the most. I think it's because they're a walking disease, because they are nothing but machines. You cannot negotiate with them. You can't strike a bargain. It's like if AIDS had arms and legs and was walking after you. It's like if you were attacked by giant Ebola. It's kill or be killed.
On the other level, they're hilarious. Because, you know, they're just these big, shuffling, stupid guys, and if you can speed walk, you're more than a match for zombies.
If I put on one of the George Romero classics, you know, maybe I'll watch it alone, in the dark. If you really get that setting where you're more willing to open yourself up, you can still get some scares out of those films. And laughs as well, right? I mean, there's a lot going on.
Richard Matheson wrote a great book called I Am Legend. It's one of my favorites. And it's sort of a siege story about the rest of the world being taken over by vampires. And there's one solitary human being, and he's barricaded himself in his home. And he's trying to fend off the invading swarms of vampires. George Romero always says that he never invented the idea of zombies. He says he stole it from Richard Matheson's I Am Legend. It's undeniable that he is the grandfather of the zombie film as we know it today because of Night of the Living Dead.
Well, when we made Night of the Living Dead, we had no money. First of all, there were 10 of us, and we called ourselves Image 10, a pretentious name, and we each kicked in $600. And that $6,000 allowed us to rent a farmhouse and start shooting.
In a report from National Civil Defense Headquarters in Washington, it has been established that persons who have recently died have been returning to life.
All our friends, all people from ad agencies, news announcers, people that from around Pittsburgh, which is where we were,
concluded that the unburied dead are coming back to life.
Who, you know, were willing to come out and make fools of themselves.
Hey, that's us. We're doing all right.
We actually made money on it. But then all of a sudden it stopped, and we said, why? And we realized that we had lost the copyright. Our title was Night of the Flesh Eaters. It wasn't Night of the Living Dead. And the distributor, Walter Reed, it was Night of the Living Dead was their title. And we, stupidly, a bunch of young guys in Pittsburgh, put the little C with the circle around it on the title. And when they removed the title, it was the same overprint, and the copyright came off. So that film is in public domain. Otherwise, we'd be doing this interview in south of France or someplace, in a villa.
Check out the house. There's something there. I heard a noise.
Dwayne, the lead actor, was an African American who just happened to be the best actor from among our friends.
If you're stupid enough to go die in that trap, that's your business. However, I am not stupid enough to follow you.
And so we just said, hey, Dwayne, would you like to do this? And we thought we were so cool because we didn't change the script when Dwayne agreed to do it. The script didn't mention anything, didn't describe him, the color of his skin at all.
You can be the boss down there. I'm boss up here.
Take zombies out of Night of the Living Dead.
Bastards.
Make it any crisis. You have a black man in the 60s becoming the leader, fighting to survive, smacking a white woman, and telling a white man, I'm the boss. Wow.
Amazingly, we didn't recognize how political the film was, how on the surface how political it was, because when we were making the film, we were basically living in that farmhouse and, you know, bullshitting about the overtones and, you know, and what was happening in the world, the war, this new funky thing in Vietnam, riots in the streets all of a sudden. And it's funny, in retrospect, I think we maybe should have pointed at that a little bit.
All right, Vince, hit him in the head, right between the eyes. Good shot. Okay, he's dead. Let's go get him. That's another one for the fire.
At the end of The Night of the Living Dead, Romero has a few final scenes, final shots, as a matter of fact, of the film that make an extremely powerful comment on racism. Using still photographies that are very reminiscent of all sorts of images that we've seen of lynchings, for instance. Black and white, grainy still photographs that you can imagine were just taken out of a newspaper on some lynching down in Alabama. And you make that connection on how all of a sudden this horror films on zombies has become one of the most powerful statements at the end of the 1960s on the reactionary attitude of the dominant white culture against the civil movement.
They need you down there by the barn.
And we just thought it was cool. We didn't think, wow, man, this is going to rock people's boats. And it did.
Welcome to a night of total terror. Night of the Living Dead.
What made George Romero so brilliant was that every one of his zombie movies fit the decade in which he was making it.
He took his unique vision of terror one step further.
In the 70s, you had people in a shopping mall, trapped by their own material greed.
What's that building? Oh, it's one of those new malls. It was the first, one of the first malls even back then, you know, so. George, you know, he made the people walking around the mall as zombies.
Everyone ready?
Go to any mall today. There are zombies walking around shopping malls today, you know, hypnotized by the music or the whatever, you know. You know, and that's why you had zombies dragging coasters or, you know, carrying stuff. You know, that was his statement.
In the 80s, you had people hiding in a bunker, avoiding the problem. Really? In the Reagan era?
Now, George A. Romero takes us out of the night, beyond the dawn, and into the darkest day of horror the world has ever known. Day of the Dead.
And of course, Land of the Dead is a comment on our modern era with George Bush and the Iraq War.
I think Hollywood is afraid of me. I mean, even when we made Land of the Dead, which was a very ambitious film, we had half the budget of the remake of Dawn of the Dead. My stuff, people don't understand it. You know, I write the script and they go, what is this? They don't get the politics necessarily, certainly not right up front. And even though Land of the Dead got probably, I think it was one of the best reviewed films of that summer.
Life goes on at Fiddler's Green, in the heart of one of America's oldest and greatest cities.
We owe that to the Bush administration. You know, it became obvious that what I was talking about in that film.
Filmmakers are very aware of the fact that the horror genre is very often under the radar. It wallows in excessiveness, and that's where they do have the freedom to make sometimes very insightful and always very shocking points about the society in which we live.
It's my way of taking this phenomenon. Oh, the dead are coming back to life. What an extraordinary thing is happening to the world. But I've used that as not in and of itself as a metaphor, but as a way to show how the world reacts to extraordinary change.
We should be a little higher.
That's why I think that Romero should be commended. Not just for what he did with zombies, but the man really was and still is one of the few directors that tries to get people to think. I mean, there's just so many eyeballs that can blow out of your head and just so much entrails that can fall on the floor before you want to use your brain and actually think.
The zombies I grew up on were the zombies from White Zombie, I Walked with a Zombie. They were those bug-eyed cats in the Caribbean, you know, who were doing the dirty work for Lugosi, who owned the castle. You know, they were picking his cotton or something, and every once in a while we could get them to knock somebody off. And people say to me now, well, you invented the new zombie. And I said, well, I never called them zombies. I didn't mean to invent a new zombie. I love the old zombies.
The fear in Haiti was not of zombies, as bad movies would imply. It's of becoming a zombie. A zombie, by folk definition, is a living dead. It's an individual who has been magically brought to his end, only to be somehow magically resuscitated, always, it's said, to be led away to a life of enslavement. And we naturally didn't believe in this sort of folkloric idea of magic. But what was interesting is that there was a series of reports in really all the literature, the ethnographic literature, the accounts of missionaries, the popular writings on Haiti, that spoke about cases that seemed to have a certain legitimacy and at least that collectively demanded investigation. And there was a very famous psychopharmacologist, Nathan Klein. Psychopharmacology is the study of the action of drugs on the mind. And Klein was very interested in a series of reports of the reputed existence of a folk poison that was said to bring on a state of apparent death so profound that it could fool a physician. And my assignment in 1982 was to go down to Haiti to try to find the folk preparation, having no idea that the assignment would consume 4 years of my life. The whole idea of a zombie was an idea that had been really exploited in an explicitly racist way to denigrate a people and their remarkable religion and culture. And this investigation offered the opportunity to turn that all on its head, to really try to make sense out of sensation, and to find out how this belief system really worked within the culture. And the key to beginning on that path was the discovery of the poison. I went around to the various Okor, the negative priests, the sorcerers. Over a series of sort of visits, I was able to secure any number of different preparations. There was a plethora of ingredients, sort of everything from snakes to toads to various plants, human remains for magical purposes. But the critical and interesting ingredient and the consistent ingredient was one of a number of species of a genus of fish called spheroides. It turns out that it has within it the most powerful neurotoxin ever discovered from nature. A lethal dose of the pure toxin would bounce on the head of a pin. But more interestingly is the way that it kills. It's this big molecule that selectively blocks sodium channels in the nerves, which brings on peripheral paralysis, dramatically low metabolic rates, and yet amazingly consciousness is retained until the moment of death. That discovery, that observation, if you will, instantly took the whole zombie thing from the realm of the phantasmagoric into the realm of the possible.
We're living, I don't want to say in apocalyptic times, because it's not. We're not living in apocalyptic times, but we are living in times of uncertainty, times of anxiety. And it's very scary to think about some of the real threats out there.
The chance of your being hurt by an atomic bomb is slight. But since there is a chance, you must know how to protect yourself.
And I think for a lot of people, it's a fun exercise to explore their anxieties in a safe way, as opposed to preparing for a terrorist attack or a worldwide recession or global warming. It's a lot safer and more fun to prepare against zombies.
Good night, Billy. Good night.
When he was left alone in the dark bedroom, Billy became frightened. He didn't understand about fear. That fear is a natural thing and nothing to be ashamed of.
Think about the monster under the bed. Okay, so kids develop fear of the dark sometime around 2 or 3. So the way a child's imagination protects him or her is that it assumes danger in the unknown. And then the child's imagination starts to create images of what there might be to fear in the unknown. So imagine there's a part of your brain, we know the part, it's the amygdala. It makes this assumption. And the assumption is everything that produces the same emotional state is the same thing. So then imagine the amygdala is looking around, looking for everything that scares you. And then imagine it builds a representation out of that. Well, the representation of everything that scares you, that's a monster.
Are you getting regular dental checkups?
Graveyard Alive is about a shy nurse who's bitten by a zombie and becomes a flesh-eating sex kitten. There's something about, maybe, I don't know if it's being a woman or just being a bit off-kilter, that I identify myself with the monster that's outside of society and trying to fit in, doesn't quite know why, feels they're a bit different, you know, kind of like Frankenstein, actually, where you feel you're different, you're not quite sure why, you try to connect with people, it doesn't always work, sometimes you kill them. It's very sweet, but kind of deadly at the same time. A shy nurse, Patsy Powers, is in love with the handsome doctor who is engaged to the bitchy rival nurse, Goody Two-Shoes.
You're in love with her again, aren't you?
And Patsy pines for the doctor, but she's too shy to do anything about it. And then, of course, she becomes a zombie along the way and has to deal with her craving for eating flesh and how she deals with it in the hospitals by eating patients, you know, surreptitiously killing them and then cutting them up in the morgue and putting their flesh in Ziploc bags. Because, you know, she's practical.
Why do people go see films? Why do people allow themselves for 2 hours to indulge in a kind of pleasure that they would never dare indulge in real life? And that is why very often we go see horror films, zombie movies in particular, but all horror films, to identify with the monster. The monster has a certain freedom that we don't have. And that is extremely appealing because as a good citizen who would never hurt anybody, who pays his taxes, who's very friendly to children in the neighborhood, I cannot allow myself to do evil. And yet something deep down inside of me, deep down inside of everyone, longs for this sovereignty of the villain, for the ability of the monster to actually do whatever it wants to. When it feels like slashing people to pieces, it does it. When I feel like slashing people to pieces because they annoy me at work, well, I'll go see a horror film instead.
I love the genre, and I would under the covers read the forbidden EC comic books with a little flashlight.
Horror comics were huge in the 1950s and I believe the early 60s. And then there was a big push in the States by sort of the morality squad to tone down on this horror and gore and all these terrible, terrible comics that were coming out. So the horror comics kind of got packaged up and set by the wayside. But zombie comics have never really stopped being produced. Within the last 3 or 4 years, there's definitely been a renaissance. Dead Eyes Open is about a world in which the dead come back to life, but not as conventional zombies. They come back to life as intelligent zombies. Imagine if you died in your sleep tonight and you woke up tomorrow morning with no idea you were dead. You went about your day, you went about your business, and about halfway through the day it occurs to you that you're no longer hungry, you don't feel heat, you don't feel cold, and you're dead. So what do you do with your life? And it kind of spirals out from there. You catch more horror fans with blood than you do with honey. If you can write a zombie comic that incorporates a lot of sophisticated and interesting ideas about people and relationships, but float it in a sea of graphic, horrible violence, then you'll attract the people who aren't likely to be interested in complex moral messages about people and violence, because they're seeing, the blood on the page, and they're intrigued and they're interested because that's what normally interests them. But you can also subtly sell something a little more sophisticated. You exercise a lot of demons doing this. You do. You get it out of your system. If there's something horrible you think, you don't bottle it up and keep it inside you. You just let it all wash out, and then it's there and it's done, and you can look at it later and you can say, oh, what a terrible thing I've done. But I did.
I'm a huge comic book fan. Any of that stuff just fascinated the hell out of me. I just really loved that whole aspect of it. And then trying to recreate that and tell stories of my own, involving those, creatures and characters and things. And I just sort of use my imagination and go ahead and tackle it, the way I see fit, I guess. I don't know. It always ends up turning out, kind of neat and cool, and people are wild about it, and I love that. I mean, it can range from, a head wound and a complete side of their face gone, deluged with maggots and, and flies and stuff, or, pustules and it really depends on what the facial expression is. With a zombie, there's more imagery involved, there's more, kind of freedom to show what a zombie is versus any other sort of supernatural or horror-oriented, creature.
The thing about zombies is they are, in some ways, the perfect tool to establish a really simple dynamic. If you want to tell a story that's about us versus them, they are not like us, and they must be destroyed. Zombies are really, absolutely, at base, the simplest way to do it.
Mr. President, in your recent budget, just to make sure I understand, you're asking for a $50 billion emergency defense supplemental to protect America from zombies.
I believe this is the great challenge of the beginning of the 21st century.
Zombies who eat brains, just so I know we're on the same page here.
So zombies become sort of the last bastion of an easy way to find an enemy you can fight and kill and feel really good about fighting and killing.
Younger readers and film goers these days, maybe they are a little more obsessed with zombies, but I think we have to look at the culture they're growing up in. They're expected to conform. They're expected to look the same, dress the same, act the same. Don't act out, don't rebel, don't challenge, don't question. And, I think that's got to eat at them, especially when you're 12 through 15. I mean, that's when you're supposed to rebel. You're not supposed to be a zombie and just walk along with all the other drones.
That's what I find the most fascinating, the idea of, consumers are zombies. Maybe people in the military who do what they're told without thinking are zombies. The average Joe not paying attention to what's going around him is a zombie.
That defines my life. It defines most people's lives. You show up for work in the morning and then you go back home at night. Why? Ultimately, in the larger scheme of things, why am I doing this? Because I'm a zombie.
You can't just have one zombie. That doesn't make any sense. You could stab it through the eye with a pencil and that would be the end of it. You need thousands, you need millions, and you need a societal breakdown. You need the end of law and order, and so you literally need to have the kind of world that we're all afraid of right now.
With all due respect, Mr. President, are you sure this wasn't a movie you saw? I mean, why?
Because they're real.
Yeah, but why
and it's a danger to the American people. It's a danger to your children, Jim.
Sorry, my name is Barry.
It took me about 2 years to write it and research it at the same time, because I wanted everything to be as realistic as possible. So the homework almost killed me.
What he did that no one else has done is he examined a zombie apocalypse story through the eyes of a UN worker who is telling stories from people all over the world. So he took it global. And the rights for this book were snapped up before it was even published.
The Zombie Survival Guide was a hit, but it wasn't a bestseller. It had staying power, which is shocking. I've always been told that the shelf life of most books is somewhere between milk and yogurt. So I was very stunned that it kept going, but then World War Z came out and was a New York Times bestseller. And apparently did so well that suddenly Zombie Survival Guide became a New York Times bestseller. And I thought, no, time. Bestsellers are murder mysteries and diet books and something to do with Jesus or George Bush. No, not zombies.
You're going to be one of the most famous novelists in America.
If I ever get the novel written.
What do you mean, if? Of course you will.
I've been told that myself and Danny Boyle, the filmmaker behind 28 Days Later, are responsible for the resurging popularity in zombies again. I don't know if that's true, but if it is, I'm very grateful to have contributed. At the time they came out, The Rising and 28 Days Later, they came out very close to each other. And there wasn't anything else with zombies. They were sort of dead, to pardon the pun. The Rising, in a nutshell, is a man searching for his son in a post-apocalyptic zombie world. His son is in one state, he's in another, and he has to basically travel across the country, picking up companions along the way. At its heart, I think The Rising appeals to readers because it's something a lot of us can identify with, not being able to protect your child, and what lengths you'd go to protect them.
In 1 year in the United States, there are about 500,000 divorces. It means many thousands of children who need the security of a home and parents lose it.
I think whether you're a filmmaker or you're an author, you put something of yourself into everything you create. In my case, I was a divorced father, much like the character in the book.
Look, Dad, it goes like this. See?
Although I say it jokingly, I really do think there's something to my zombies are the divorce lawyers and the telemarketers and, all the other annoyances of our modern world.
I decided that I should evolve them to some extent, because they're not going to just walk around and remain so stupid. They're, no matter how dense they are, they're going to learn something.
Most people that have followed Romero have tried to add something. They've made them faster, they've made them smarter, they've given them something in addition to what Romero has created. I've actually taken away. I've made my zombies even dumber than Romero's. Maybe even slower, I don't know, but certainly dumber. Because the dumber they are, the scarier they are to me. If they have some semblance of humanity, Doesn't scare me. It is that absolute lack of humanity that terrifies me.
Then you get into the whole fast-moving versus slow-moving zombies, which absolutely is a conversation that any horror movie fan has had at least one time or another.
I don't like running zombies. I don't think zombies should run. They're gonna get you anyway, because they never stop. They're relentless. So why have them run? It also doesn't make physiological sense too, because their muscles and their sinews, or all their muscle insertions and attachments, have all now rotted and disconnected from their bones.
I mean, I saw bumper stickers, fast zombies suck, okay? I don't know whether George put those bumper stickers out or not, but it's because you'll never see a fast zombie in a Romero film. His idea, if you're dead, you're continuing to be dead. You're continuing to disintegrate or rot, you know. You don't become superheroes, you know. Like the running zombies, you know, like perhaps in the remake, you know. In the original, there were key zombies. The nun zombie, the baseball player zombie, you got to see the zombies. In the remake, fast and ugly. You didn't get to see them.
Parker.
Yeah, I'm the Wizard of Gore, the King of Gore, Dr. Splatter. I've been called that.
Right. And action, Tom.
In general, most people who don't really know the body of work, Mr. Makeup, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead, being in Land of the Dead, being in the Dawn of the Dead remake.
I understand you're having a difficult time killing these things, Sheriff. Just shoot them in the head. They seem to go down permanently when you shoot them in the head.
Directing the sequel, so yeah, I've been associated with zombies, I guess. It makes perfect sense to me now. When I was about 11, you know, I saw Man of 1,000 Faces, and that's the first movie that shows somebody creates this stuff, because I believe they were real before that. And then I decided, well, I'm going to be the guy that creates that. You know, I had this effects school here. I get effects jobs, but I turn it over to my students. There is a cult following out there for the next Romero zombie film. It's almost like the next Star Wars film coming out, or the next exhibit from your favorite artist, Romero or me as the effects guy. And I think Greg Nicotero has taken it a step further as well. The baseball girl zombie with half her jaw missing, you could see through. That was makeup, and that was pretty damn good.
Scary jaw rip girl. I can't even tell if you're smiling underneath there or not. Because you're just, there you go. You're like, you can talk, you know. There, see? She talks and everything. That's really good. In Night of the Living Dead, they just had virtually no makeup. There was a couple latex wounds on them. And then, of course, Dawn of the Dead, you had your hero makeups, and Tom sort of set that blue-gray pallor to their faces with all the wounds and stuff on it. And then that was kind of the mark. Then when we did Day of the Dead in 1984, we took the design a little further. We went with like browns and gray palettes, and everything had real funky-looking teeth. And then as films have progressed, the techniques of makeup have also progressed, and the talent of the people that do it.
The county coroner, I would call him constantly and say, well, look, if a body's in the basement of a building, or if it's in the attic and it's hot, you know, he'll tell me how long it's, he wants to know how long it's been dead, and that determines the skin color or if they're bloated, you know. So there's a lot of research that goes into making the dead realistically dead, you know, so especially when they're walking around.
If you imagine over and over again doing all these creature effects, you don't want to ever feel like, oh, I've seen that look before, I've seen this before, I've seen that before. So you're constantly trying to reinvent what people look at as zombies. One of the concepts that I was thinking about as I was looking at like old photos of old mummies and stuff, and the first thing you notice is their lips always shrivel away from their teeth. And one of the things that's so interesting is zombies look really more menacing when their teeth are exposed. That's basically their primary weapon, is their teeth. So one of the things that we came up with was manufacturing vacuum form clear dental trays that you would put them in your mouth, and it would push your lips back. So your teeth were always exposed, but you weren't snarling. It was like almost as if the lips had shriveled away. 20 years ago, myself, Howard Berger, and Bob Kurtzman founded K&B Effects Group. We literally have had our fingers in most of the films that have been made over the last 2 decades. I've always felt obviously a tremendous debt of gratitude to George Romero, because George was the guy that opened the door. And of course, he still makes jokes to this day about, oh, one of these days your dad's going to just see me in the street and smack me in the side of the head because you were supposed to be a doctor, and now, you know. I'm like, George, trust me, there are no regrets.
The primary reason why zombies are appealing is that they look like us, but it's okay to kill them, right? And in some very interesting ways, right? So zombie is an absolutely no-guilt snack, right? You can kill them all day and, well, or put them down because they're undead, but you can kill them all day and you need not feel guilty about them. It's just sort of an extension of the movies, but again, like literature, your canvas is huge. You can do the kind of things that you don't have the budget for in a movie. So game makers are exploring these sort of vast landscapes and doing all kinds of crazy, you know, gravity-defying gore stuff. And that's where the appeal is there. I think that's where all the new ground is being broken in terms of gore in zombie stories. So yeah, those games are just probably going to get bigger and bigger as long as the imagination is behind them.
It appears the dead are coming back to life and eating the flesh of the living.
Video games in general follow fairly predictable themes because most of them involve killing something or shooting something. So there are things that you can archetypally kill. You can kill Nazis, you can kill space creatures or aliens, you can kill robots, and of course the undead. You think about this kind of stuff all the time, mostly just because it's fun. You know, that whole what if scenario. Best evidence of that is the popularity of zombie walks, where people are dressing up like zombies and acting like zombies. That's also just sort of a great little way to have a fun rebellion.
Tell you the truth, me and my boyfriend made a zombie contingency plan. Yeah, it's a little sad. There could be a man-made virus that could infect people and turn them into zombie-like creatures. All they have are the primal urges, you know, eat, drink, sleep, breathe, whatnot.
So, you know, my zombie strategy is just keep heading north. When winter comes, it'll be cold, they'll freeze. Come spring, you come out, problem solved.
Well, what a lot of people don't know is that Max Brooks and David Wellington and myself and all the other zombie writers, we actually have a compound in Colorado. And we all, you know, we can all get there safely should the zombie epidemic ever happen.
My home has one staircase, so in an emergency I can just pull up the stairs and I'll be fine.
I've got a balcony, so you know, if I had to snipe some zombies, I could do it from there. I could assess the overall situation. I could bar the doors. You know, I could get rainwater if I needed to.
In an emergency, I have grown enough bamboo that I can plant them and build a fence out of it. I'm ready. I'm pretty much ready. I got good soil. I can start growing some turnips. Yeah, you better not come for me.
People have to be able to deal with illness. They have to be able to deal with death. They have to be able to deal with mental disorder to some degree and all sorts of strange behavior. And unless they have exposure to that and practice in it, and unless it's sort of a part of day-to-day life, they don't know how to cope. So, you know, they turn to substitutes of all sorts to try to find ways of exposing themselves to that, especially when they're teenagers.
You know, I don't know why zombies have chosen to come back now. I don't know if it's, you know, the times we live in, if it's a reflection of our world, of how much scarier things are today, or if it's simply that, you know, people were ready for something different again.
We live in a world where you consume fast food and you're irradiated with cell phone waves and you're just really under assault all the time. I think in many ways we feel like zombies. So it's easy for people to understand, oh yeah, there's some kind of weird scientific mishap which we suspect is probably going on anyway, and now they're zombies, rather than, you know, a demonic force has possessed someone and they're hanging out in a graveyard. They're not in a graveyard anymore. A graveyard's a very religious thing. Zombies are now in your shopping mall.
I'm not scared of ghosts. I'm not scared of anything like that, the dark powers. No, I'm scared of something that's real and physical, like disease. When you think about how the influenza of 1918 killed more people than the Black Death. 1918? That's not even 100 years ago. That's terrifying.
The best horror, be it movie or book or video game, is something that we can all identify with. It's taking a shower and finding a lump. It's sending your child outside to play and hearing the screech of car tires a moment later. It's that phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's the things that all of us, regardless of where we live or who we are, it's a shared fear. And those are the things that keep me awake at night.
I think zombies remain an interesting story for a lot of reasons. That line between life and death, and how people define that inexorable separation between life and death determines their mystical worldview, but it's basically the one single thought that is constantly at the back of anyone's mind who is conscious.
I think if you don't give something room to blossom, it'll die. That'll definitely happen to the zombie subgenre. If filmmakers, storytellers, game makers stop pushing those boundaries.
I would love to do a zombie movie where, a guy's just a torso dragging himself around, or, as long as the brain's intact, they're going to be walking around. So, with things like that, with half the bodies missing, that would, to me, look like dead people walking around.
It's amazing to me, actually, that, this little film, a bunch of us young guys in the Berg made this movie, and now that creature has become sort of idiomatic. You got to shoot him in the head. I mean, people know zombie rules the way they know vampire rules. Within a couple of years, maybe even months, forget about it. And then 10 years from now, somebody will say, hey, remember those zombie movies? Let's make a zombie movie, man. So I